Tonight's Vegas Nation Raiders 2020 Draft Preview Show is presented to you by AHE Windows and Doors, quality you can afford.
We are now the Las Vegas Raiders.
Some great memories in Oakland. Wish we could have brought that city a championship, but looks like we're going to have to do it here.
Excited to have a city that is excited about having us. We can't wait.
Welcome to the Vegas Nation Raiders 2020 Draft Preview. I'm your host, Cassie Soto. Things do look a little different than we had planned, but that doesn't mean our content for you will be any different. We will be giving you a recap of what the Raiders did during last year's draft and what the Silver and Black are likely to do this year with 2 first-round draft picks. This is General Manager Mike Mayock's and Head Coaches John Gruden's second time around. So will they finally find a star wide receiver, or will they look to replace Derek Carr by drafting a quarterback? We'll also hear from a pair of 2019 rookies who give us first-hand experience of what it's like to receive the call. The countdown is on for the 2020 NFL Draft, so let's get to it.
Let's start by taking a look at the 2019 Raiders draft class. Running back Josh Jacobs had a standout rookie campaign, racking up more than 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Raiders' number 4 overall selection Clelin Ferrell didn't quite hit the mark. The defensive end struggled to find a role, finishing the year with just 24 solo tackles and failing to force a fumble all season.
We just got a look at all of the rookies and last year's stats. To go more in depth, we bring in now Raiders reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Myles Simmons. Myles, who was your rookie of the year? Who stood out to you?
I think it's got to be Josh Jacobs. Look, when you think about all the things that he was able to accomplish, even in basically just, 3/4 of the regular season, I thought that he was somebody who was pretty special, really dynamic, obviously a really good runner, and he's somebody that the Raiders can then build their offense around. I think that it was probably a little bit disappointing for the Raiders fan base at large that he did not get Offensive Rookie of the Year. Instead, that went to Kyler Murray. But I think that he made an undoubtable impact on this franchise, and he should be somebody that can be great for this team for years to come.
Well, I think I might know the answer to this, but who, in your opinion, had the most disappointing season from the 2019 draft class?
Okay, well, from a personal standpoint, I think it would probably actually be Jonathan Abrams, since he was hurt, really, and he didn't get to play the entire time. And I think, knowing him a little bit and getting to talk to him throughout the course of the season, he was just so disappointed that he wasn't able to get on the field because he loves football that much. But I think when you talk about the performance as a whole, it's got to be Clelin Ferrell. Okay, he was the number 4 overall pick. And when somebody gets drafted that high, you expect them to make a heavy impact right away. And I think that there were some good things that Ferrell was able to show. But overall, when you only have the sack numbers that he got, and you were the 4th overall pick, and you get overshadowed really by somebody who was a 4th round pick at your same position, it makes a little bit of a difference. But, Clelin Ferrell is somebody who went through some injury concerns. He was played a little bit out of position maybe. So there are things that I think he can definitely improve on in 2020.
Is there anyone from this draft class that really surprised you, someone you didn't expect such a good season out of?
Yeah, Max Crosby would definitely be that guy. I mean, to get to double-digit sacks, that's not something that's easy for a young player to do, especially somebody who's kind of raw like he was coming into the league from a smaller school. So I think that it's definitely Max Crosby who had that sort of surprise that you would get out of it. From a rookie standpoint. And I think he's still got so much room to grow under Rob Marinelli in 2020.
All right, Myles, give me a letter here. What was your final overall grade for the 2019 draft class?
I'll go B+.
Very good, Myles. Thank you so much.
No problem, Cassie.
Ahead of the draft, the Raiders have already picked up some much-needed depth for their roster. The Raiders were busy during the free agency period, picking up some big names, including former Titans quarterback Marcus Mariota. Joining me now is Las Vegas Review-Journal Raiders beat writer Vinny Bonsignore. Vinny, how much better did the Raiders get with their new offensive weapons?
Well, offensively, I think they added depth, obviously. With Marcus Mariota, they wanted to improve the quarterback room. They wanted to push their starter Derek Carr. They want a better performance from him. They want a better performance offensively. I don't necessarily think that Marcus Mariota is going to be a major part of the offense. I think that's obviously Derek Carr's job. And plus, when you consider the fact that, there's going to be a condensed OTAs off-season program, if there really even is one, and maybe even a condensed training camp, that puts Marcus kind of behind the eight ball because he needs to get up and running as quickly as possible, acclimated with his new teammates as quickly as possible. That might not happen. I think Jason Witten adds a nice veteran element at tight end. But most of the work that they did was on defense, and that's where they really needed the help. And I think offensively, the help that they really need at wide receiver is going to come in the draft.
Right. You mentioned defense. Who are some big standout names that could hopefully make an immediate impact for this team?
Well, I really liked what the Raiders did defensively. They addressed linebacker, which was a position that they absolutely had to address. Corey Littleton from the Rams, Nick Kwiatkowski from the Chicago Bears are two day one starters next year that offer a significant upgrade over what they had last year. They brought in Demarius Randall, a safety from the Cleveland Browns, who will be a starter either at cornerback or safety. They added depth, they added starting caliber players, and what they really did was created some flexibility for themselves in the draft. They don't have to reach at linebacker. They don't have to reach at safety. They don't have to reach at interior defensive line. They've addressed those positions. So at those positions, you can comfortably go best player available, but not reach desperately for them. And it really zeroes their major need to wide receiver, and they're perfectly set up to do that and to deal with that with the 12th and 19th pick overall.
Perfect, Vinny. Thank you so much.
You got it.
We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the future of the Las Vegas Raiders and who the team might pick up in the 2020 NFL Draft.
It's time for some Raiders trivia. When was the last time the Raiders had a number 1 overall pick? Was it A, 1997, B, 2004, C, 2007, or D, 2014? Find out the answer after the break. When was the last time the Raiders had a number 1 overall pick? The answer is 2007, when the Raiders drafted Jamarcus Russell. The former LSU quarterback is considered one of the biggest busts in draft history after throwing 18 touchdowns and 23 interceptions in his abbreviated career.
Yeah, I talked to the Raiders. Real cool guys, man. They're a young group. They're trying to make a new transition, and like I said, if I'm fortunate enough to get picked up by them, they're gonna get everything I have.
I had a formal interview with them last night. Went really well. I really love their staff. They have some really great coaches, and so that went really well. And the Raiders, a phenomenal program, a phenomenal team. Obviously, the history that the Raiders have, on defense. So, really good being with them.
I just really wanted to get to know the coaches, and I wanted the coaches to get to know me and see what type of player I am and see how my football IQ, I do everything well.
That video you just saw there might have been one of the last times the Raiders themselves got to see those players in person, given the coronavirus pandemic. We know that it had nationwide shutdowns, canceled most, if not all, pro days, leaving teams unable to travel to potential draft picks. Myles, how were the Raiders and everyone around the league really able to speak to players knowing that they couldn't travel to them in person?
Yeah, everything is turned to virtual, and that's really the entire way that the draft is going to be conducted as well, everything virtually. So when you look at it, you can have 3 interviews a week with one player, each lasting no longer than an hour. So this is something that's really different because usually they do what they call top 30 visits. So that means you get to bring in 30 players to your facility and take them around your facility, sit them down with different coaches, put them on the whiteboard if you want, and see their football knowledge, their football IQ that way. So this is something that GMs have said it still has value when you're going through the FaceTime process, but it is a little bit more impersonal because you don't get that face-to-face interaction.
Right. And I mean, how often or how far into this process, usually when there isn't a pandemic going around in the world, do teams know this is our guy? Do they wait until pro days? Do they know until the combine? How is this really just turning things on its head?
Well, it's really interesting because a lot of times, especially for top picks, those guys won't necessarily be a part of those top 30 visits that always happen. I mean, sometimes you might meet with somebody at the combine, or you might meet with them even at the Senior Bowl going all the way back in January, and that team will not contact you again until the draft, either because they know they don't want to tip their hand. There's just so much information that you can get throughout that doesn't necessarily include talking to the player. Jonathan Abrams actually was one of those guys that the Raiders met with at the Senior Bowl because the coaching staff was there last year at the Senior Bowl. And then he told me he really did not have much contact with the Raiders at all until basically the night before the draft, when he started getting a couple texts from John Gruden and also Mike Mayock. So there's a lot that goes into this process. It really affects, I think, more guys toward the bottom of the draft than those at the top.
Yeah, going off of that, I mean, earlier in the show, you mentioned Max Crosby and his standout performance for the Raiders. How likely will they find those Max Crosbys of the world in the third round? They have 3 third-round picks to be able to find those guys, or they are just going to wing it and see who's left on the board there?
It's going to depend a lot on the tape. And so when you have something like this where you're not necessarily going to get to meet with guys as you would before, you don't get to go to those pro days, you got to rely on the tape. As they say, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. So how do you translate what you see from the college film to what that person could potentially be on the NFL field for the Raiders? That's what they've got to work through.
What do we see as the prolonged repercussions here, coronavirus pandemic, affecting these teams down the road?
Boy, it's difficult to say because we're just not through it yet, and I think that once we sort of see where things are allowed to go in the coming weeks, months, as well as days, then we'll probably have a better idea. But I think it's hard to say right now what exactly the NFL is even going to look like in September. Will their training camps be able to go on at the end of July, early August? We just don't know. There's so much we don't know right now. So I think that'll determine a lot of it.
Myles, thank you.
Thank you, Cassie.
Let's take a quick break, and on the way back, we will take a better look at the draft class of 2020 and who the Raiders could have their eyes on.
From 2000 to 2019, the Raiders have had how many first-round picks? Is it A, 22, B, 23, C, 26, or D, 28? The answer after the break. From 2000 to 2019, the Raiders have had how many first-round draft picks? The answer is 22. The Raiders currently own 2 first-round draft picks in the 2020 NFL Draft at numbers 12 and 19.
Well, we know wideouts Jerry Judy and CeeDee Lamb have been on most, if not all, mock drafts leading up to this point for the Raiders at that number 12 spot. Myles, how do you think either of them, whoever gets picked at number 12, will fit perfectly into the Raiders system?
I think that they'll fit really, really well. Look, the Raiders definitely need some explosive plays out of the wide receiver position. They need a number 1 guy. And this is a really good time, really, for them to be in that market for number 1 wide receiver when this class is so deep. And the Raiders have 2 picks in the first rounds. And that means that at 12, the Raiders may have their pick of somebody like Jerry Judy or CeeDee Lamb. So I think both of those guys are strong route runners. I think CeeDee Lamb might be just a tad bit more explosive, just in my viewing of him. But I don't think that is, something bad about Jerry Judy at all. I think either way you go, you're going to get a very good wide receiver in between those 2 guys.
Well, as far as the 19 spot goes, Myles, someone whose name has creeped onto some mock drafts is Jordan Love, quarterback out of Utah State. How do we think that quarterback situation is going to play out there?
He is somebody that did have some trouble with interceptions there in his last year at Utah State. So that's something that he's going to have to improve upon. But I think if you look into the crystal ball and you say, okay, the Raiders are going to take Jordan Love, well, then what happens to the other quarterbacks? I think that's a scenario where Derek Carr might get moved, and then you might start off with Marcus Mariota as a starting quarterback and then have him be a bridge to Jordan Love. Because especially with, the offseason programs, you probably aren't going to have any of that, and training camp may or may not be shortened. It's going to be tough for a quarterback to come in here and learn everything that he needs to learn in order to be a successful starter straight away.
Myles, thank you. We all know how much attention the first overall pick usually gets, but sometimes it's those guys in the later round that make the biggest impact down the road. Ever heard of a guy named Tom Brady? Pick 199th overall back in 2000. Vinny, who are some recent hidden draft gems for the Raiders that have made an impact for the Silver and Black?
Well, look at Max Crosby last year, led the team in sacks, was a day 1 starter. So he comes in and adds a great element. Hunter Renfrow in the 5th round, a wide receiver that when he was on the field was a difference maker in the slot. So you just have to go back 1 year from today to find 2 starters that the Raiders uncovered on the 2nd and even 3rd day of the draft. So when you can keep hitting on guys like that, all of a sudden you're really putting yourself in a good position. And they certainly did that. And they're certainly going to look to do that again this year.
Right. Well, foreshadowing there, the Raiders have 3 third-round picks, 1 in the 4th and 1 in the 5th. How much potential is there for the Raiders to find another Max Crosby, another Hunter Renfrow?
I think there's a lot, because I really like this draft is steeped at a lot of positions. And there's some names that I think Raider fans should become aware of. Jeremy Chin, he's a safety from Southern Illinois, fits every profile that you're looking for. He's about 6'3", 215 pounds, can cover, can hit, can defend at the line of scrimmage, can defend in the back end of your secondary. He's a guy that I would keep an eye on. Logan Wilson, a linebacker from Wyoming, started his career at cornerback in high school and safety, moved over to linebacker in college, can cover, can play range, sideline to sideline, can come up and stop the run. So he's a 3-down type of a linebacker who I think has a bright future in the NFL.
Great. Well, we will see what happens on day 2 and day 3 of the draft. Vinny, thank you so much.
Since 1994, America's top college football receiver has been awarded a trophy named after which former Raiders great? Is it A, Tim Brown, B, Fred Biletnikoff, C, Cliff Branch, or D, Jerry Rice? Since 1994, America's top college football receiver has been awarded a trophy named after which former Raiders great? The answer is Fred Biletnikoff. 2020 draft prospect Jerry Judy was awarded the honor in 2018 after posting more than 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns.
We can only imagine the nerves and excitement players are feeling come draft night, waiting anxiously to hear their names called. Here to share their own personal experience on what it's like to be drafted by the Raiders is wide receiver Hunter Renfrow and cornerback Isaiah Johnson.
It was surreal. I mean, it's something I dreamed about my whole life, of just being able to play in the NFL, but having that chance to get drafted. I remember I was with my good friend Will and my wife and my family, and I actually went and threw football that morning, had a good morning. And then as I'm watching the draft, you literally don't know. It's like you can get drafted anywhere in the country. And so you're sitting there and you're nervous. You don't even know if you're going to get drafted. And so you're sitting there and you have everyone around you that you love and they love you. And so it was such a fun time for me, and something I'll remember forever.
Just the phone call in general, that feeling of getting that phone call from a team to, that they chose you to come play for them, that was a great feeling. But, everybody has to go through that waiting process of getting their name called. You get anxious, it gets kind of hard for a little bit, but that feeling when you finally get that call, it's like the world's been lifted off your shoulder, you finally get to go play football. So for me, that's what it felt like. I finally got to go play football. It was Coach Gruden. He called me and he told me that he wanted me to come be a Raider. And they just told me, the rundown, like, we want you to come in, compete, play your best football, play your brand of football, just come play Oakland Raider football.
Mayock called me initially, and he called me Doogie Howser. I didn't know who that was. But he kind of made fun of me, and I was like, that's a perfect introduction, I guess. And then I got to talk to Gruden and just how fired up he is. And that's how he is all the time. I was like, well, maybe he's just fired up on the phone, but no, he's always like that. And that's why he's such a good coach. But it was interesting phone call, but I was on the other end of it, and I was just super excited.
It does not. And I said that on my draft day phone call. I told Coach Gruden, it's not about where you get drafted, it's about what you do when you get to where you're going. So, the whole draft, the draft isn't just about your talent level. It's about team needs and a whole bunch of other factors. So you can never factor in where you get drafted so much, but you got to factor in the way you play when you get there and your mindset as you go in the building.
I just be a sponge, I would say. There's so much wisdom around you. You can see the guys that have played 10, 15 years in the NFL, and you have some of those guys on your team, like a Richie Incognito or Derek's getting up there, and just how they approach every day, how they get better every day.
I'd say no matter what happens, keep your head up and keep going. As a rookie, you're going to get faced with all kind of challenges. You're going to have money that you never had before. You have attention that you never had before. You're going to have roles that you have to fill. So many things are going to be expected of you. And it's going to be a lot on your shoulders. But the biggest thing is to take everything in stride and keep going. Learn from the things that's happened. Learn from the things that are going on around you, and apply that to what's coming next, and you'll set yourself up for success. So just be ready for everything that's going to come and know how to deal with it.
Of all the Raiders' first-round picks in the last 10 years, how many of those players are still with the team? A, 4, B, 7, C, 8, or D, 11? Stay with us for the answer. Of all the Raiders' first-round picks in the last 10 years, how many of those players are still with the team? The answer is 4. Colton Miller from 2018, along with all 3 selections from last year's draft, Clelin Ferrell, Josh Jacobs, and Jonathan Abrams.
Vegas Nation, the road ahead, presented by AHE Windows and Doors. As we wrap up here, Vinny, I have to ask, come April 23rd, do the Raiders keep their number 12 and 19 spots, or do they somehow put them into a package deal to trade up?
Well, I've got 2 different scenarios here. One is they fall in love with one of the quarterbacks, whether it's Justin Herbert from Oregon or Jordan Love. And if they get a sense that they're going to go ahead of the 12th pick, which in Justin Herbert's case, that's an absolute for sure. So let's say they like Justin Herbert and they have to be aggressive and trade up to go get him. It's going to cost them the 12th pick, obviously, probably the 19th pick as well. Short of that, I see them holding on to the 12th pick overall. But that 19th pick, that becomes a key chess piece that they have. And I think that there's a good chance that they could trade back, actually, drop back maybe 6 or 7 spots in the first round, and also pick up a second rounder as a result, so that they could have a little bit more space in their draft between the first round, second round, and third round. It would probably cost them one of their third round picks, but they pick up a second round pick by using that 19th pick to move around the chessboard a little bit.
Right, you mentioned those third round picks. We know the Raiders have 3 of those, so they maybe trade out one of those to get into that second round, which they don't have as of right now.
I could even see them trading up back into the first round to get a third first rounder. The key there is that when you have a first round pick, you have 5 years of control of the player as opposed to 4 years with a second round pick. So let's say the Raiders like Jordan Love and he's available there at the 28, 27 pick, and he's still available. A quarterback like that who needs a little bit more development, you want to have hold of him for a little bit longer, and that 5th year becomes really important. So maybe they package those third round picks, a third round or a second third rounder, along with maybe next year's first rounder to move back into the first round to secure a quarterback that they may really like.
That will do it for our Vegas Nation Raiders 2020 draft preview, but we will have plenty more coming up for you. Every day after the draft, April 23rd through the 25th, we will bring you a 1-hour live show recapping the day's events. I'm Cassie Soto. Thanks so much for watching.